Ethereum has really been struggling this bull market, especially against Bitcoin, as have many other altcoins. But in today's video, we'll be showing Ethereum a little bit of love, talking about why it's undervalued relative to other altcoins and Bitcoin. We'll also be going over the recent Bitcoin price action and discussing why that impacts Ethereum and the rest of the broader markets. If you enjoy the content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. Without further ado, let's jump right into the video. So first, let's kick us off with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin will likely determine what the rest of the altcoin market will be doing, and that of course includes Ethereum. As we can see here, we are still in this all-important breakdown range. Bitcoin broke down over here after consolidating for several days right around the beginning of February. And as we made our way into the last part of February, that is when Bitcoin completely collapsed and went ahead and set its first local low. Then we got a pump to the upside, came back down, got another low, another pump, and then finally we made our low for this cycle thus far. Now, of course, this gravely impacted Ethereum and the rest of the altcoin market because Bitcoin dominance was already rising at that point with monetary policy not in favor for altcoins. Now, what I'm looking at here for Bitcoin is for us to hopefully hold this area as support. Now, for now, it does look like we're continuing to consolidate exactly as we've been discussing on the channel over the past couple weeks. It would not surprise me if we chop around this range for quite a while longer, at least until we get FOMC, which is right where this line is put. If we take a look at the past two FOMC meetings, we can see that Bitcoin did get a little bit of a pump. If I just drag this down, we got a little bit of a pump only to get rejected and then move on lower. Same thing in this case, we got a nice pump on the daily chart and then we got rejected, but we saw a little bit of more continued uptrend until Bitcoin went ahead and put in its next low. Now, I need to warn you beforehand, if Bitcoin gets rejected at this key breakdown area, it will not be positive for Ethereum or the rest of the altcoin market, as we've come to realize with Bitcoin dominance continuing to increase. But now that we got that out of the way, taking a look at the Ethereum chart, we can see that all the way back in 2022, we saw some nice consolidation around this level. And that's why, as I shared on the channel, I was accumulating Ethereum below $1,600. We accumulated some ETH right around here as we were making our way into this region. And then we also accumulated some more ETH below $1,400. Now, only time will tell if this bounce can be sustained. As I said, if Bitcoin continues to dump lower, Ethereum will likely follow and find its way back into this range, which we consolidated in for quite a while in mid-2022. So if you believe in Ethereum and you want to be accumulating at lower levels, this could be a potential interesting region. But just remember, we wicked into here and moved up pretty aggressively. The reaction we get should we come back down here will really be determined by Bitcoin. Now, let's touch on Ethereum in its regression band. We can see that over the course of the past few cycles, Ethereum does tend to come back down to the bottom of its regression band and then see a massive pump to the upside. Usually we touch the bottom in bear markets, but we can see that in this cycle alone, we did not touch the bottom. Now we are in a bull market and Ethereum did make its way back into its regression band. Now, if history repeats itself, Ethereum could make its way a little bit lower in the regression band, especially if monetary policy stays the same. Now, what would that imply? That would actually mean that Ethereum could theoretically go as low as $1,100. Now, I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but we have to assume that it is a possibility. Of course, if Ethereum were to make it that low, I would be expecting another big correction for Bitcoin. If Bitcoin continues to stabilize and monetary policy shifts, I do think that Ethereum could see some significant upside. Now, the most important chart as it pertains to Ethereum that we've been covering on the channel for a while, ETH against Bitcoin. As we can see, we came all the way down to 2019 levels, and it looks like we're trying to hold it as support. If I zoom in here, Ethereum is now sitting at 0.019, and the previous area of support was around 0.0175. So, is this the final bounce for ETH against Bitcoin, or can we head lower? We should be assuming that if monetary policy does not change, which means that if the Fed stays in quantitative tightening, that means that this line will continue to go down, and it's likely that Ethereum will continue to bleed against Bitcoin. This is a pretty important support level though, and so this is why I have already started to accumulate some ETH Also with my Bitcoin. This is something that I would like you to learn as well, is to always measure your portfolio and your altcoins in Bitcoin. What I mean by this is, yes, we can look at the Ethereum dollar valuation. Right now it's at $1,800. But if you go back here, you always want to see, is your altcoin holding up well against Bitcoin? And that's specifically why, with Bitcoin dominance going up, most of my portfolio has been in Bitcoin for this cycle. Earlier on, if you've been an early subscriber to the channel, you know that I dabbled in meme coins here and there to do quick 3, 4, 5x's, but ultimately that narrative has died down quite a bit with pump fund revenues now at all-time lows. So, Ethereum against Bitcoin. If you believe in ETH and you are holding some Bitcoin, this is most certainly not the worst level to be converting some of your Bitcoin into Ethereum. Of course, this is not financial advice. I know there's a lot of haters for ETH, and we can always assume that maybe Ethereum will never come back to where it ever was, but that is not my base case, and I think that Ethereum will be outperforming Bitcoin when monetary policy shifts and when this line starts curling up when we get into quantitative easing. Now, we might not actually get quantitative easing as soon as we think, but at the bare minimum, if this line can start flattening out, we know that they're starting to reduce their quantitative tightening measures. And so, if we start to see this, it could be a very positive sign for Ethereum. We saw that last cycle, it timed it perfectly. When this line started going down and they ended quantitative tightening, that is when Ethereum against Bitcoin bottomed out. And some alpha here, if you're not necessarily into ETH, you still would want Ethereum to bottom out against Bitcoin and see a big pump, because that likely fuels the rest of the altcoin market, regardless of what altcoins you're looking into. So now that we've covered that, why do I think that Ethereum can make a huge comeback when we're in better market conditions? First of all, the numbers don't lie. If we take a look at the total value locked, we can see that there is still $52 billion locked for ETH. Then the number 2 is Solana, and that comes in at just around $8 billion. That's quite a big discrepancy. And if you really want to observe it closer, as we can see here, this is the chart of all other chains compared to Ethereum. It accounts for over 50% of the total value locked in the crypto space. This is one of the many reasons why I believe that Ethereum will be making a strong comeback. Then we of course have World Liberty Financial, which is associated with President Trump. And we can see here that if we go on their holdings by chain, 94% of their holdings are based on the Ethereum chain. There's a reason for this. Do you really think that these guys are bearish on the Ethereum ecosystem? I don't think so. Now, if we take a look at the spot ETFs, we did see that if I scroll up here, we had significant outflows for the Ethereum spot ETFs all the way down into about late April. Then things started to turn around. As we can see, there's a lot more volume coming in. 38.8 million, then 63.5 million, over 100 million, and 64 million, 18 million, a little bit of negative, and so on. But what we can see is that the trend is starting to look like it's turning around. Again, I do have to remind you that it will be ultimately based on how Bitcoin performs. Ethereum really has no chance if Bitcoin goes ahead and rolls over here. But if Bitcoin can see sustained strength and we do get that favorable monetary policy, I do think that Ethereum will absolutely rip. So what are the key levels that you should be looking at for Ethereum? Right here, we have the lows, which was below $1,400. Then we have a very important must-hold zone right around 1750. If I go on the ETH chart here, we can see exactly what I'm talking about. Zooming in a little bit. If we hold these lows right here, it will ultimately bode over very well for Ethereum, and I do think that we could see a nice pump to the upside. Now, what are the other regions? Well, we can go all the way back up to around $2,100, which was another previous breakdown point for Ethereum. Hold that level as support, and we could be going much, much higher, all the way up to 2.8K. Again, if monetary policy shifts and Bitcoin does continue its uptrend, I have no doubt in my mind that Ethereum will be making an all-time high, which is exactly why I started accumulating at around $1,600 and around $1,400, and I also started to convert some of my Bitcoin to Ethereum. In my opinion, when you measure Ethereum against Bitcoin, we are currently at some of the most attractive levels. And a reminder, 2019 was the last time we were this low. If you don't believe in Ethereum, then fair enough, but this is also just a friendly reminder to always measure your altcoins against Bitcoin. Because if you did, you would be in Bitcoin only, as we can see on this Bitcoin dominance uptrend. Another reminder, if you're new to the channel, I'm currently targeting 66% for Bitcoin dominance. And if we can hold here as support, I do think that going all the way up to 70% is probable if monetary policy doesn't shift. So we've been over the key Ethereum levels, and if Bitcoin does decide to go lower, we would likely find support at the bottom of this regression band, which is all the way down to $1,100. But if Bitcoin can hold support at its previous breakdown region, which we've discussed thoroughly throughout my last few videos, then I do think that Ethereum has a strong chance pending monetary policy. I still think that Ethereum will be putting in a new all-time high at some point, but it's extremely difficult to tell you how soon this would be. For now, I've been looking at the best possible levels to dollar cost average into Ethereum, and remember, no one can time the bottom perfectly, which is why you should be adopting a dollar cost averaging strategy. But if you don't necessarily want to hold Ethereum in your spot bag and you just want to trade it, you have the first link in my description down below, which brings you directly to Weeks, where you can earn a 20% deposit bonus. That means that if you deposit $10,000 into your Weeks account after signing up with the first link in my description down below, you can earn up to $2,000 for free for trading. And all you need is an email and a password to sign up. And that sums up today's video. I thought I would try something different by only discussing Ethereum as the market continues to chop around and Bitcoin stays stagnant in this all-important breakdown zone. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video.